Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope everyone has had a beautiful and joyful Eid with their loved ones. The Nisa Helpline family wishes you continuous happiness and joy with your loved ones. We're still at the month of the Hijjah, which is one of the four sacred months in Islam. We're back to continue our series for this month, inshallah, titled Sacred Months as a Measure of Healing. We aim to establish the relationship between the spiritual meaning in Islam and healing. This series, inshallah, aims to bring people close to their faith, to strengthen their mental health, knowing the virtues of what Allah makes sacred and holy. So today, inshallah, is our second session of the series, which is titled Using Faith to Heal from Trauma. We are so privileged to have Sister Reena Vanza with us today. Reena is one of the co-founders and directors at Cedar Way Therapy. She's a registered psychotherapist. She specializes in anxiety, grief, depression, and trauma. She has been in the mental health field for over 15 years now, supporting individuals and the community. Reena has been a stout mental health advocate, providing workshops and training to increase knowledge about mental health issues and decrease the stigma that we see in our community today. As you can see, Sister Reena is well equipped to present us today's session where we discuss those trying times. We face a lot of Islamophobia around us, and we just wanted to kind of address that today, inshallah, in our session. We learn all about trauma, useful coping skills, and the impact of faith in healing, all from a professional mental health perspective. So, inshallah, do expect this to be a 30 to 40 minute session, including a 10 minutes for questions and answers at the end. Prepare your questions and reflections, and we'll be more than happy, inshallah, to kind of address them at the end of the session. Without further ado, let's start our session, Using Faith to Heal from Trauma. Bismillah. And there you go, Sister Reena.
All right, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me. First of all, I want to thank Nisa Helpline for doing this phenomenal series, and I thank you to let Cedar Way Therapy come in and talk a little bit about how to use faith to heal trauma. And as Lika mentioned, I am a psychotherapist with Cedar Way Therapy, and today I'm here to talk to you guys about how to use faith to heal trauma. And I'll be asking Lika to change slides because I couldn't manage the technical side of everything. So Lika, next slide, please. All right, so today's agenda, basically, I'll start off with a small disclaimer. I'll define what trauma is with all the various definitions out there. We'll do a little bit of understanding what trauma is. I'll talk about something called protective factors and resiliency. And then I'll talk about the role of faith in trauma. I'll share some resources, and then we will open to question and answers. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so the disclaimer is very simple. This is obviously a presentation only for the purpose of education and awareness. There is going to be no sort of like diagnosis or me asking you to change any advice given to you by your mental health professional. If you want to take anything and you need to adjust anything, please do talk to whoever your healthcare provider is. But this is completely for the purpose of education and increasing your awareness about trauma and using faith as a coping tool. Okay, next slide. All right, so we'll start simply by defining what trauma is. I just want to make clear, I'm not talking about PTSD, which is a condition that can develop if trauma is not dealt with properly. We're talking about trauma here. So a traumatic event is one in which a person experiences. So this experience means either you witness it or you're confronted with it yourself. Okay, so actual or threatened death, serious injury, a threat to physical integrity of self or another. And the definition I like to go by is that trauma is the lasting emotional response that often results from living through a distressing event. Okay, and there's various responses to traumatic events, and this can vary depending on the person. And a lot of people, they face intense fear, they feel a sense of harm to self in terms of safety of self or safety of others. There's a sense of helplessness or hopelessness, and in longer term reactions, people can experience unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, strained relationships, and even physical symptoms. A lot of people experience trauma, and they talk about headaches, continuous migraines, and stomach issues and things like that. And there's a small note down there I do want to iterate here is that for most people, symptoms disappear over time, right? But if they do not, or they start to interfere with your day-to-day living, always seek professional help at that point. Next slide. All right, so how do we continue to understand trauma? Trauma can be very personal and private experiences. So things like sexual assault, things like sexual abuse, domestic violence or interpersonal violence, witnessing domestic violence, these are all very personal and private experiences of trauma. But then there's also public experiences of trauma, things like natural disasters, wars, community violence, something that we as a Muslim community are facing right now. These are also traumatic experiences that we can undergo that can contribute to symptoms of PTSD and things like that. Next slide, my dear. All right, so it's very important to understand that trauma is a very personal experience. My experience of something is going to be very different from somebody else's experience. Okay, so trauma really overwhelms one's capacity to cope with something. It affects the whole person. People often don't realize that when someone goes through a traumatic experience, it can affect them physically. So, like I mentioned earlier, people experience headaches and nausea and physical symptoms. It can affect people emotionally, where they talk about feeling emotionally numb or maybe overwhelmed. It can affect people mentally, where there can be cognitive impairments, following basic instructions, finishing school or work. And it can also affect people spiritually, where someone does not feel connected to a higher being anymore, right? So when people say statements like, get over it, it's in the past, right? Those statements don't help. Support is very critical in overcoming trauma. And I'll talk a little bit later about post traumatic growth, right? So we have to understand that when an event passes, if it affects an individual, then it affects their whole self. And so learning about trauma, learning about how to support yourself and others is vital as we, continue to heal either individually or as a community. Next slide. Right. So often you'll hear mental health professionals talk about risk and protective factors. And so when we talk about trauma, we talk about mental health, we usually talk about these two factors. And risk factors are basically the characteristics at a more biological level, psychological, family, community, or cultural that precede and are associated with a higher likelihood of negative outcomes. So that just means like if you have genes that some people have genes for schizophrenia or other mental health illnesses. If you have, if you live in an unsafe or a poor environment, if you're exposed to violence, this just basically increases your chance of compromised mental health outcomes. Okay, but then we also have protective factors, which are the exact opposite. These are characteristics associated with a lower likelihood of negative outcomes, or that reduce the risk factors incomes, right? So impact. So it's not all like doom and gloom, where if I have risk factors, what do I do? We can always learn, like today, how to enhance protective factors. And these are things like your family, your friends, how to make your environment safe, your religion. And so the take home here is that protective factors increase your sense of resiliency. And so we're going to talk a little bit about resiliency, because when we talk about trauma, we have to talk about how do we get to that post-traumatic growth, and that's through resiliency. Next slide. And so, what is resiliency, right? A lot of my work is based on resiliency, and that's basically the capability of individuals to cope successfully in the face of significant change, adversity, or risk. Okay, this capacity actually changes over time and is enhanced by protective factors, what I just talked about. So, your family, your friends, your safety, all these things, we can increase our resiliency as we start to increase these protective factors, right? And so resilient people are those people that have a growth mindset. They have an enthusiastic approach to life. Does that mean they're overly optimistic or they just have this positive gung ho? No, it's actually quite the opposite. They have a realistic viewpoint, right? This is going on. What can I do about it? How do I cope with this? Who can I contact? Right. So they don't get sidetracked by the negativity. They're able to focus on how do I grow out of this? And this is something that we can cultivate. So if you're someone that goes, no, but Reena, I go towards a negative, we can actually learn to cultivate how to be more realistic and how to have a growth mindset, right? Resilient people have a sense of meaningfulness and purpose. And this is kind of where our religion comes in, as we'll talk about later, right? So the more people have a sense of purpose and meaning to life, the more resilient they are. Okay. They have an internal locus of control. That means they do think they have control over things. They do believe that they have a part to play where they can create change, whether in themselves or somebody else. They're not sidetracked by the hopelessness of the situation. And so the definition I like to go by is basically it's the ability of a person to bounce back from challenges through feelings of control, commitment, and the ability to see change as a challenge. Okay. Next slide, please. Right. So, survivors of trauma who use protective factors can experience something called post traumatic growth. And this is what I'm talking about. The post traumatic growth is even due to the trauma or even after the trauma, instead of losing hope, they're actually able to grow. So they can have more strengthening of relationships and a sense of connection. They can increase sense of personal strength. They have an awareness of increased possibilities of life. So a lot of people think, after trauma, it's just the gloom part, right? It's not. With the right type of connections, resources, support, we are very resilient creations, right? But as I said, connection is vital here. We are created to connect. We're not created to be in isolation. We cannot survive in isolation. So the main point here is that we can't do this alone, right? So post-traumatic growth does come out of healthy connection. Next slide. And so you may ask, why are we talking about trauma, right? It's a heavy word people often assume or think, and rightfully so, right? Uh, but remember earlier in one of my slides, I talked about what trauma really is, that personal and private experience, and then also that public experience. And so right now we are exposed to community violence, which can be traumatic for many people, right? So today's focus, Nisa Helpline asked me to talk about resilience and growth and trauma in light of everything going on in our community, right? And our community, if you look at the other communities that we live with, they're also facing trauma as well. And so we live together, we're bound to feel what they're feeling as well. We're bound to carry it with others who are going through traumatic experiences. If you look at what's been going on in the Muslim community now, Muslims have faced violent events in the community, whether we're looking at attacks in Ontario and other provinces. And then as a result, we're looking at an increase in Islamophobia. If you want more details on this, look at the work by National Counseling of Canadian Muslims, which is NCCM. They have a lot of research and findings around the increase of Islamophobia. And we are continuously exposed to negative events. So what do we do here? How do we get this growth mindset? How do we become more resilient? How do we cope as a community is what we're talking about. Because if we don't do that, then that can lead to compromised mental health. And when we lead to a compromised mental health, we have impacts on ourselves, like our mental health goes down. And if we have responsibilities of being a father, a mother, a sister, a caregiver of any type, a teacher, whatever it is, if your mental health is compromised, then the mental health of those around you and the people you're taking care of also starts to get compromised. Next slide, Lika. Right. So, what do we see in clinic? I was asked to talk a little bit about that. And so, due to all these events that are going on, we see a heightened fear from feeling unsafe. Right. We've seen a lot of women, especially, talk about not feeling comfortable going outside for walks. I know that there was a buddy system that was starting to be developed so that Muslim women, don't have to go outside for walks after what happened in the London attacks. A sense of hopelessness of we came here for safety. What's going on? Other people, we were born here. Why do we have to feel like that? Some people bring things like self-identity issues where they're contemplating Islamic attire due to safety. Should I be wearing hijab outside? Should I go to the mosque? And do I pray in public or even private settings? Obviously, with this, self-confidence is affected. A lot of Muslim youth, right? Do I feel confident as a Muslim youth now in society? Do I have to compromise and give up certain aspects of my identity to feel confident out there? And then because of everything going on, people start to isolate. I'm too scared to go out. I don't feel safe to go out. And we know, clinically speaking, isolation is not good for your mental health, period. Right. So whether you already have an existing mental health issue, anxiety, depression, for instance, and you are isolated, that will worsen your symptoms. Okay. And if you don't, then isolation can lead to depression. And so this is where we have to be very careful as a community, where we are building connections. We continue to raise and build capacity so that our people are not feeling isolated. Our community members are not feeling isolated. And as I said earlier, if all these things are not met, then we do have reduced mental health well-being. Okay, but the good news is that we can work together. We can build resilience together. And this is what Nisa Helpline is doing today. It's a way to help the community build resilience. Next slide. All right. And so today, the question is really like, how do we heal? Right? All this is going on and it continuously goes on. How do we heal from the past? How do we heal from what's going on right now? Next slide. And the other question is, what does faith have to do with it? Right? Often I hear, unfortunately, like, oh, people say, go pray Salah, you'll be okay, right? Go fast, you'll be okay. Of course, those are important concepts of a religion that they do help, right? But a lot of people don't realize how holistic Islam is. And that's what I kind of want to touch on today. Okay, next slide. Right. So earlier, I talked about protective factors, right? And just to give you, to remember what we're talking about, protective factors are characteristics associated with a lower likelihood of negative outcomes, right? They're factors that reduce the impact of the risk factors, right? So we said family, friends, environment, feelings of safety. And so religion falls into a protective factor, right? So religion is one thing, a factor that enhances our resiliency. There's actually studies out there, and if anybody wants to read those studies, I can send Nisa Helpline the links and they can definitely share with you guys. And even if you Google the role of religion in healing and trauma and things like that, you will find a lot of positive outcomes. So studies do show that people with a higher index of religious and moral beliefs can better control their distress. They have better mental health stability. Also, having these religious and moral beliefs enable post-traumatic growth. It causes healthier reactions to external stimuli. So when things are going on out there, you're not feeling hopeless. You have a better control of your impulses so that the reactions, in this way, having religious and moral beliefs helps you overcome psychosocial problems and socialization, leading to improvement in your mental health outcomes. Okay. Religion and moral beliefs also have a direct positive effect on self-esteem, emotional health, life satisfaction, meaning, and purpose. Everything I talked about in resilient people, right? So it's a factor that can help you in building your resilience as a person. And so faith, religious and moral beliefs falls into positive coping. You often hear clinicians talk about positive coping strategies, right? So faith is one factor, one thing we can consider as a positive coping strategy. And so Islam is a religion all about resiliency. Today I'm talking about Islam because Nisa Helpline made efforts to do this presentation, and they asked me to touch on our religion, which is Islam. Okay, but we can say faith increases resiliency. Next slide, please. Right. So I really wanted to touch on this because a lot of the times in clinic, I do hear people say things like, I've been told to pray. I've been told to fast and things will become okay. I've been told to just give zakat and things will become okay. So I'm not going to obviously say that those things don't help. They will help. They have to help. They're part of our religion. They're beautiful concepts in our religion that will always help. But I want to take our minds away from just thinking of our religion as praying, fasting, and zakat. Okay. If you think about Islam, it's a very holistic religion, right? So Islam teaches us about time for self, right? About spending time with your mind, with your body, with your soul. So I want you to broaden, open up your minds around, what do I mean by faith in healing trauma? What do I mean by faith in helping my mental health? Okay. Start asking yourself questions like, what are my boundaries? Do I know when to stop media intake? Do I know when to stop talking to people about traumatic events, right? How do I know that? How does my body react to external stimuli? How do I know when I'm exhausted of hearing about news? How do I know when I need to disconnect with others and come back to my Lord, right? This is what Islam teaches us. It teaches you that time for yourself is very important. It's critical. Okay, Islam teaches us about family. We know all the virtues of being with family, right? And so asking yourself, do I listen and hear my family members? Do I validate their feelings? Do I provide correct information according to their age, right? Oftentimes we have this hush hush, like we don't talk around this or we whisper around this. Children make conclusions, right? And if you don't give them the right information, they'll make their own conclusions, right? So, as a family member, as a mother or a father or an older brother or sister, those children have rights over us, okay? So how do I spend time doing meaningful things with them? So, do we pray together? Do we spend time with nature? I know right now um, it's summertime and people are hiking and things like that, right? Do I do online meetups? Do I meet with in-person meetups according to your COVID rules of whatever region you're living at, right? But Islam teaches you to put your family first, right? It's not all about me. It's about my family as well. Islam teaches us time for community. Islam is all about community involvement, right? Volunteering for good causes for the sake of Allah, donations, advocating on causes that are important to us, right? So, have you asked yourself questions as how do I get involved? And here's the beautiful thing about this research actually shows that volunteering helps with mental health issues. And so, the way it does is it helps with the feeling helpless and hopeless. A lot of the times when things happen, we kind of think, I can't do anything about this. I feel so hopeless. Nothing's within my control, right? Well, we can find out community organizations that are involved in causes that are meaningful to us. And we can find out in what ways can I be involved? In the most least of ways, I can give $1 for donation. That's involvement. The beautiful thing about Islam is it's always with intention, right? Even a date can be seen as feeding thousands of people. It's your intention. So even $1 towards something helps. Spreading good news, spreading accurate information with what these organizations are doing so that we can take out false information, right? So asking yourself about, am I involved with the community? And then Islam also teaches us, then there's time for spiritual practice. So here's my prayer, here's my zakat, here's my fasting, right? Do I make time for these things as I do all the other things? How do I reflect every day on my day? What have I done? Okay. Am I introspective? Islam is all about introspection. Am I mindful, right? How do I feel grateful even amongst all this chaos? How do I find ways to feel gratitude and peaceful within myself, right? Research again shows that gratitude has positive effects on mental health well-being. And this is all in our religion. So if you kind of break down Islam, it will give you a holistic way of dealing with things. We are not as hopeless and helpless as these situations may make us feel. Okay. So the question you have to ask yourself is, am I balancing these acts or am I spending more time on one? A lot of the time, people are either completely engrossed in community involvement and they think this is what I'm doing. I'm doing so much, but yet I feel burnt out, Reena. Yeah, because you're overdoing one thing, right? I give all my time to my family, Reena, but I'm still feeling burnt out. Yeah, again, because you're doing one thing. We Islam is a religion of holistic care. There's time for everything. And here's the beautiful part, right? This is that cherry on top. Depending on intention, everything you do can become a spiritual practice. So when I make the intention of time for myself for the sake of Allah, becomes a spiritual practice. When I make the intention of time for my family for the sake of Allah, becomes spiritual practice, right? When I make intention of time for community for the sake of Allah, that becomes spiritual practice. That's something that I find so beautiful about this religion. Next slide, please. What else does Islam teach us? Remember the topic today is how do I use faith to heal, right? And I'm taking your minds beyond just prayer and dhikr and things and salah and fasting. I'm taking your mind to how do I make life about faith. And so Islam teaches us about controllable versus non-controllable factors. This is something we do in clinical practice. We teach people a lot about what are you able to control and what are you not able to control. If you look at it simply, you're able to control self, you're not able to control others. Okay, so looking at my actions are controllable, my reactions are controllable. What I can do with the certain, so what I know for a fact, I can do. If there are assumptions, I don't know what to do with that. What I can't control is the actions of others. I can't control the reactions of others. And I can't do anything with the uncertain. I don't know what to do with that. And in Islamically speaking, that's not within my realm, right? As you'll see, in Islam, we're taught the tolerance of uncertainty, right? And when times are uncertain, we're told, Allah has hikmah over this. We're asked to trust that process, right? And there's a wonderful hadith that I wanted to share with you guys here is the one in Muslim. Wondrous is the affair of the believer, for there is good for him in every matter. And this is not the case with anyone except the believer. If he's happy, then he thanks Allah, and thus there is good for him. And if he's harmed, then he shows patience, and thus there is good for him, right? So it's not to say that we do nothing, right? This is what people sort of misrepresent, like, oh, just do nothing about it. If you believe Allah's going to take care of it, do nothing. No, we're told this is what you can do. This is within your control. Do the things that you're able to control. But the things that you cannot control, know that there is something greater, an all knowing power that knows everything that's happening, that is controlling everything, right? And that itself gives us hope, right? So knowing my controllable factors versus my non controllable factors is very important for growth. Next slide, Lika. Right. I did sneak this slide in here because in every presentation that I do, or even in clinical work, people always ask me, what do I do for children? How do I help my child? And even my elders now, right? Um, that's the question. But the answer I always give is help yourself first. If you help yourself first, your children will model you, right? Children are copycatters. They use our words, they copy our behaviors, and they process according to what they see. So if they see anxious mom, they're anxious. If they see a calmer mom, they can be calmer, right? So really being mindful of what I'm saying at home, where I'm watching the news and what I'm saying about the news. If I talk about something scary, how do I then provide an explanation and then provide hope to my child, right? Same thing with elders. If you have elders in your home, helping them set boundaries because of the online nature. A lot of elders are spending a lot of time on phones, right? Like we see them on phones now as much as youth are. So helping them set healthy boundaries, giving them alternatives, connecting them to meaningful community events and people as well. And just, remembering that our behaviors are contagious. So whatever we do at home, our children are going to follow. So starting with yourself first, I talked about the holistic care earlier, right? Is something your kids will start to mimic. Next slide, Lika. And so there are many other protective factors, right? And the beautiful part here is that this is everything Islam teaches us, right? Talking to a professional, no shame in that. Um, there's community volunteering, team sports, or groups, clubs, um, your friendships and getting along with others. So good peer relationships, supportive relationships with family. Seek out those people that are supportive, that understand, that you can talk to. Accessing support services outside of your home. So I will share a few at the end, but there are many resources out there where you can call distress lines, or you can seek counseling, or you can talk to your doctor. Um, Learning about positive coping, like today, if you're here or if you're going to listen to this later on, you're learning skills that you will add. Even if you add one thing to your life today, you've added resiliency to yourself. You've added a positive coping mechanism to life. And then focusing on self-care. I can't stress enough the self-care bit. A lot of people ask, clinicians like myself, how do you do it, Reena? How do you listen and help people 8 hours a day and then continue with your life, right? Self-care is huge. And I could do another presentation on self-care because a lot of people think it's selfish, right? I always, you hear that, that story about, when you go on a plane and they say, put the mask on yourself and that on others. So cliche, right? There's nothing far from the truth. That is the most accurate story out there, even as a clinician. If I don't put my mask on, I can't be present for you, right? If you don't put yours on, you can't be present for your family and those things that you want to be part of. So focus on your self-care. Look back to the slide where I talked about the holistic self-care and start to make small changes for yourself. Next slide, my dear. Right. So, I wanted to touch on this because I find it very interesting that everything that we do in clinic is basically what our dean teaches us. Islam teaches us this, right? So what I've been trained to teach people is, help people to tolerate difficult emotions and uncertainty. So part of my work is helping people feel comfortable with the uncomfortable. Anyone that's worked with me knows that it's a statement I use all the time, right? How do we become comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, right? And Islam teaches us the importance of reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have faith in Him, that He knows what He's doing, right? The other thing that we're taught is help people to create boundaries, right? Help people learn about the controllable versus uncontrollable. And Islam teaches us exactly that, to stay within our areas of control. Do what's in your control, have tawakkul in what you don't have control, right? And then the other thing we're taught is to focus on hope over fear. I mean, with Islam, it's beautiful because we are going to experience things that, make us feel fear. So we can't always focus on the hope, but we can't be fearful of fear, right? And Islam teaches us to live between fear and hope. It's like the scholars talk about the bird with the two wings, right? You can't rely on one wing more than the other because it's not going to take you far. We live a life where there's a balance between fear and hope. Okay. Next slide, Lika. And so today's take home messages really are all about you learning what protective factors are and increasing them in the smallest of ways, which will help you build that resiliency. Okay. Focusing on your controllable factors. What is within my realm? What can I do? Right. And what do I do with what I can't do? That's where faith comes in. That's where reliance on something bigger than you is very important. And this is where religion is a positive coping strategy. Hopefully I've taken your minds beyond the prayer and the salah, the zakat and the fasting. Continue to do those things, of course, but think of religion as bigger than that. Think of it as a lifestyle, right? And that will help you embed faith within your everyday practices. Connecting with others and seeking support. I said to you earlier that human beings are wired for connection, right? There is no way we can do things alone. When I work in clinical settings, the people that I can connect to other people do better than the people I can't connect, right? So look into your community. What can I get involved with? What speaks to me? Okay. Do I have friends and family that I can connect with more often? And if you don't, then as I said, look back in your community. There are various events taking place that you can be part of, various things that will speak to you. For some, it may be domestic violence. For some, it may be, the fight against Islamophobia. For others, it may be mental health, whatever it is. Feeding the homeless. There are so many things. MashaAllah, our community is doing a lot out there, right? And then the other one is the modeling at home. Model the holistic self-care, model your boundary setting, model your faith practices so that those living with you can copycat you. And then remember that life is in balance. We can't just do one thing. That's what takes us to burnout. We have to be able to live in balance because us focusing on one thing doesn't make that one thing better. Okay. If I'm continuously taking in media around what's happening, I'm not helping the cause. Okay. What I'm doing is I'm burning out. And then the very things that I'm responsible for, those start to suffer. So start to do things in balance. Okay. Next slide, Lika. And so there are many resources. Of course, the first one here is the NISA helpline, right? There's a KMH that has amazing resources that you can access. Connects Ontario, Nasiha Mental Health, Muslim Resource Center, Muslim Chaplaincy, Khalil Center, the family doctor. If you don't know where to start, you can't find any contacts. If you need the contacts to this, we can definitely send them to you. But if you're completely lost, talk to your family doctor. This list is obviously not exhaustive. There's a lot out there. You just have to reach out. And that's what I was talking about, resilient people that have internal locus of control. They know when they need to reach out. So the more you're self-aware of yourself, the more you're self-aware of this is not how I should be feeling. This is when I don't feel good. This is my anxiety. The more you're able to know, okay, this is the point I have to reach out. And I urge you, we are connecting human beings to connect out there and to reach out for support. Next slide. I think I'm at the end. Yeah, I don't know if I spoke super fast through this or, but at the end, and I'm open to any questions that have come in or anything that the moderator wants me to discuss.
That was amazing. Jazakallah khairan, Sister Reena. That was very informative. A lot of important lessons and information. Um, SubhanAllah, covering up on time management and splitting your time with the different avenues in your life. I think that's something many of us struggle with, from personal experience as well. Like, it's something that I always have to kind of step away and be like, is there an imbalance, And I realize that that imbalance is there. And SubhanAllah, it's interesting enough that you also even balance really just covers everything. Like,
Right.
my takeaway from all of this is just balance everything in your life. Especially how later on you were sharing, balance with hope and fear. Um, because they're both valid things that we all have in our life, like you said. So I think they're all great, mashallah. Um, Touching up on volunteering as well, I think it's very humbling. There's always something that we also feel so helpless with, but then it gives you that opportunity to do something, and you know that there isn't an internal, benefit, like financial benefit or any other
Right.
agenda behind it. So I actually really appreciate that point, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, and Lika, the interesting part of the volunteering part, it's interesting that you raised that because we often think, right, I'm doing it for others, right? Like I'm going to do this for, but here's the beautiful part. There's also something about that it's still for us because some miraculous way we end up feeling good, right? Like when we do good for others and we think, oh no, I'm not going to benefit, we actually end up feeling good. And so it works both ways. And that's why I always push people towards volunteering in something that's meaningful for them.
Absolutely. Alhamdulillah. I think those were actually, yeah, all great points. Mashallah, I really appreciated all that you shared. Um, I think I had one more point that was just really stuck with me, but I completely lost it now. But I think I'll leave room for questions right now. So we're open for questions and comments. Please share in the comment section below, and we'll share them with our speaker, inshallah. I know I have one question. How to continue our faith during the healing process and comforting others to be steadfast in trusting Allah with all ups and downs.
Right. Very good question. And I think one of my slides that talked about focusing on yourself first, right? We can't help others if we're not able to help ourselves. And so many of the times I do hear this, but they're not listening, they're not following. We talked about controllable versus uncontrollable factors. Modeling is very key. So if you're doing it for yourself and you're modeling it, if you're dealing with an older population, you can't force anyone into faith, right? But hopefully your gentleness and your modeling is going to influence them to follow. And as I said to you, if you make faith more about holistic living, right, and intention, then it gives people more opportunity to participate, right? No one really thinks about spending time with family as ibadah, right? So if we broaden that definition and we allow these things to come in, then other people who think they're not practicing can actually feel part of this. I am practicing, right? When I'm spending time with my family, when I'm spending time with myself, these are all practicing our faith. I don't like to limit it just to if they're not praying, if they're not, then that means they're not practicing at all. Okay. So my dear, continue modeling and continue taking small steps, and inshallah your loved ones will follow.
Inshallah. Yeah, that's a great point, alhamdulillah. Um, I think like you said again, and it really goes back to that balance piece, really, that as long as you're able to take care of yourself and you're putting that balance in yourself, then you're able to give more. And I even call out my the frontline services manager at NISA hotline. She always tells us, as long if your cup is not full, you can't fill other people's cups. So you always kind of need to know that you should focus on your own support
Yeah.
before you provide that to others, because otherwise, eventually you'll it'll be unproductive for you to kind of proceed with whatever you're doing.
100%. I have, it's funny, I picked up this bottle because this is a bottle I use throughout all my work, and it's a massive bottle, but I usually finish it. And what I tell people is, imagine, you have a bottle and people can see you have a bottle. So like you're a mom, for instance, and someone comes to you with a cup and says, Reena, pour me water. right? And so here I go to pour because I'm supposed to. This bottle's supposed to pour water, right? But then I have nothing in there. But remember, the people we take care of will be like, pour. I said pour.
Yeah.
Right, like there needs to be water in there, and so that's what I kind of, I like it too, that we need to fill this so that we can pour into somebody else's cup. That I like that analogy quite a bit.
Love that analogy, actually, very helpful. And it, the more that I hear, it's just the more that fill up your cup just sticks to my head, that I need to make sure my cup is full, my cup is full. So that's great. Hamda, do we have any other questions? Does anyone have any comments, anything that they'd like us to cover? I guess we'll give him like a few seconds.
I saw something pop up about Reena. Can you explain? I don't know where that went.
I believe it was that question of continuing our faith during the healing process.
Oh, okay.
Maybe some more time. But yeah, alhamdulillah, I really appreciated that. And even like whenever you were talking about, kind of that intent, that spiritual peace does not have to come from like salah. I always tell myself like, I need to pray more or I need to do this more. And it is something that I need to do. And, there's always room for improvement for all of us, inshallah. But there is also that piece that you don't have to just stay focused on those five things. There's a lot more that you could do.
Right.
Um, Sometimes maybe just helping Allah's creation is even better than helping yourself, or more useful
Right.
to society or the community than helping yourself. So I see one more question actually come up again. How do you overcome the barrier of spiritual abuse when bringing faith into the picture for a victim of trauma?
Right. Very good point. So that is someone that I would ask to seek the professional help, right? Spiritual abuse does exist, right? Now we have to sort of really ensure we're dichotomizing the difference between what we can get from the faith versus the people that perpetrate abuse using spiritual means, right? So we don't want to dilute the faith because of what people do, right? So, but I understand, because I work in this field, a lot of people that have undergone spiritual abuse then cannot sort of use spiritual means to heal. However, yes, seeking professional support for that would be ideal, and there are ways to overcome that as well, and to bring in your faith in titrated or smaller ways that can make it more doable for you. Okay.
Okay, that's it. One more question. What are the fine lines between using faith to heal and using faith to further the oppression and abuse that someone is facing?
What are the fine lines? Yeah, abuse is always, when we talk about abuse, we talk about coercion, right? And we know Islamically, there's no coercion in faith. So this is where that fine line is. Like, is it making it a gentle, beautiful way to come in, or is it coercing someone or forcing someone, especially when we're working with adults, right? We really have to be careful of that. And so when I talk about abuse, abuse is any type of force or coercion, whether it's financial, spiritual, physical, emotional, all the types of abuse. Okay.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. That's, mashallah, I feel like that's a very helpful response. And we have another one actually. So, how to set boundaries with family members, friends, and relatives, and still be there for them. And I think that's a question that always comes up to me as well, and
Yeah.
to the community.
I think that's a presentation on its own, huh? Healthy boundary setting. And a lot of our issues come from unhealthy boundary setting, guys. So yeah, I would say learn a lot about boundary setting, but how do we set boundaries and continue relationships with others, correct?
Mhm.
I think the best way to answer that would be, so long as you're clear on what I'm doing for myself and I'm not imposing it on others, right? Many of us who are reverts have family members, for instance, that are not Muslim, right? But we are very clear, or many of us are, as to what I do versus what you do, right? And so long as you are strong around what I do, you can continue to have healthy relationships with other people who either don't follow you, have different faiths, or things like that. So I don't think, again, that forcing part needs to be part of the equation. I'd say stay steadfast and strong in what you're doing. Ensure that you're very clear and confident about your practices, and you make dua for those that don't. But you can't allow it to sort of affect your relationships in negative ways. Okay, I hope that answers. But these are very good questions that I have to answer quite generally.
No, you're absolutely right. Like, I think every one of those would actually need an entire presentation for them.
Right.
Especially setting boundaries, I feel like that's always harder. With family, for example, and especially in Islamic families, it's like we know that there's so much, so much respect I have to give to my mother, so much respect I have to give to my family, my brothers. So when I'm just stuck in that position, I'm like, how do I set my boundaries when Allah tells me that I can't even, even like move my face from my mom? So it's
Mm,
like it just puts you in that position where I don't know where to stand.
right,
I think
right.
that's really where the issue comes. Like, how do I set that boundary? Um,
100%. And I think, I mean, not to divert, and I don't want to divert at all because I want to come back here, but a lot of times, it's how we do things too, right? We don't have to do things in harshness. We can learn to do things in gentle ways. And again, I said, seeking professional help for how to learn healthy boundaries and things like that would be very important. Yeah.
Inshallah, that's great. Alhamdulillah. I think that's all the questions so far. If anything comes up at any other time later, inshallah, just feel free to put it in the comments. And we'll be more than happy to kind of, address it either with Sister Reena, or kind of give out contact information. So Jazakallah khairan again for speaker, Sister Reena. That was amazing. And the audience, I pray that you benefited from this session as much as I did, alhamdulillah. And I know with the questions, I see that a lot of people were engaged, so alhamdulillah, that's always great. We're continuing our Support Sisters series as well, so I just wanted to announce that. It's a private, non judgmental, women only safe space to share and talk about your concerns with other women. It's moderated by trained individuals, inshallah, and it wouldn't be trained professionals, sorry. And it's private on Zoom, only women. Um, our third session, inshallah, would be titled Overcoming Barriers to Self Care. So it is a little bit of an extension to what Sister Reena was sharing with us. Um, it's coming this Tuesday at 2 p.m. EST, 11 a.m. PST. You can register from the link on our Instagram page, inshallah, Nisa Helpline _official. Thank you for everyone again for attending this session. Don't forget to check out Nisa Helpline social media accounts for all our updates and daily reminders. And Jazakallah khairan again, Sister Reena, for all the very, very valuable information. And for all the answers to those questions. I think that's a question that really roams around our minds every single day. So you were able to address that for us, alhamdulillah. So jazakallah khairan for that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, guys.
Of course, jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Like I said.